Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from our previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. It's time for something a little different. See, when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of Bruce Timm's DC Universe. I watched Batman the Animated Series and Superman daily. I remember watching episodes of Justice League and Unlimited when they first premiered. And while Superman will always be my personal favorite, you could tell Batman was always a superior series from whatever angle you approached it from. It was human, had compelling villains, and so many characters became icons in their own rights because of how they were personified. So, when it was announced Bruce Timm was working on a new Batman series with a noir spin, oh, you bet I'm ignoring J.J. Abrams' involvement and hoping it's something absolutely incredible. I had honestly not even thought about talking about the show. I thought it was going to be, just a slam dunk across the board. And then the reviews started coming in, and they looked sort of like this. People were either absolutely loving or absolutely hating the series for drastically different reasons. It was mind-boggling to me that a show made by someone that defined a lot of our childhoods could be so divisive. So I had to look at it. I mean, this would have to be some kind of absolute catastrophe that forgot the fans that grew up with the show. It had to be this active insult to the intelligence of the viewer. And so I had to investigate. Was Caped Crusader this woke drivel that people were claiming it was? Well, there's only one way to find out and 3 questions that must be asked. What worked? What failed? What spectral pickpockets will be curtailed? We're nowhere close to done because it's time to review Season 1. Alright, I saw people complaining about this episode the most, so this has to be just unapologetically awful, right? There's a party on the iceberg party boat and all the who's who are invited. We even get our first appearance of our first classic Batman villain brought to the screen. And it's the Penguin. And he's brought to life incredibly by the award-winning actress, Minnie Driver. Huh? Yeah, they reimagined the Penguin as Eswalda Cobblepot, this showgirl-esque character who runs a crime organization with the help of her 2 sons in the hopes of one day overthrowing Rupert Thorne as the crime lord of Gotham. If there wasn't any creative liberties taken with the Penguin and it was just the weird waddling old Penguin but now as a woman, I think I would have actually had a problem with it. But I love that they reinvented the Penguin in a way that would make sense for the time. I don't know, I really enjoyed the character even if they're really only in this episode and only for about 10 to 12 minutes overall. Also, Rupert Thorne is brought to life fantastically by Cedric Yarborough, who really goes all in this season. I've heard him not care in performances before, and I've gotten deep into Paradise PD, but every single actor in this show is giving their absolute best. We also get Commissioner Gordon and his daughter Barbara, who's a defense lawyer, played by Eric Morgan Stewart and Crystal Joy Brown, respectively. And while neither has a ton of credits to their name, much less voice roles, they actually stand out as some of the best performances in the show. On top of them, we'd get the legendary voice actor that I've talked about a ton, Gary Anthony Williams as Flash, and his partner, Avery Bullock, would be played by John DiMaggio, who's no stranger to the world of the Bat. And speaking of bats, Harvey Dent would be played by Dietrich Bader, who brings the less-than-stellar mayoral candidate to life like only a real Batman could. And I suppose we should talk about that eponymous bat. The Batman in this series is very much a year 1 Batman. He's very low-tech, he's not perfect, and his portly Pennyworth is always looking out for him. Speaking of Alfred, he'd be played by Jason Watkins, who honestly does a great job with this younger, protective Alfred, and I really appreciate it. But of course, we have our new Caped Crusader, and he'd be played by Hamish Linklater. And I want to be clear, Hamish is an incredibly talented actor. If you haven't seen Midnight Mass, you absolutely need to. He is fantastic in it. It's on Netflix, and it's great. He's a very accomplished actor, and if anyone can deliver a great performance, it's him. The problem? I don't think anyone would disagree when I say Kevin Conroy is the definitive voice of Batman. He's the voice generations grew up with and brought both Batman and Bruce Wayne to life in a way only he could. He was a legend of voice acting, and you can feel his influence in any Batman project, especially this one. Hamish is trying so hard to match Kevin Conroy's inflection and techniques, and it just gets jarring. Because if you imagine Kevin Conroy saying these exact same lines, the delivery wouldn't change at all. It would sound right. And I hate drawing attention to it, but you can tell this was written with Conroy's Batman in mind. Conroy had worked on all the Batman projects, on Justice League Unlimited. He was an integral part to an animated Batman narrative. And so, to lose him so tragically, you have to find a good replacement. And I do appreciate what Hamish is trying to do. He is trying to copy that style as best he can. It's so noticeable. I will admit, as the series goes on, he does sort of find his own voice for the character, but it makes you miss Kevin that much more. Anyway, we find out that Flass and Bullock are dirty cops, which wouldn't be the first time Bullock has been taking some scratch behind the back. Like, the whole climax of the episode involves the Penguin revealing that the umbrella atop their boat is actually a giant cannon. This Penguin isn't afraid to take out her sons if she can't trust them, and every other element around her, with it being the Iceberg Club, with it being a giant cannon in the shape of an umbrella. These are all things you'd expect from like an Adam West era Batman episode. This is a motivation that Penguin would absolutely do. But I mean, to gender flip such a classic, almost overdone Batman villain to tell a unique story is just, it's baffling. It makes you scratch your head. It's like asking what if Joker was a woman or if Superman was a communist. It's never been done before, and it can't be done. I refuse it. The whole episode feels like just a solid, almost Dragnet-esque adventure. A radio serial given life. And even at the end of the episode, Batman fails to stop the Penguin from taking out the police station and even acknowledges he failed. Like, sure, the first episode is usually the weakest, but man, I was entranced every second of it. This was just amazing to me. I don't know, maybe I'm just not understanding where the hate's coming from. In Treacherous Waters is a suitcase packing 8 out of 10. Frankly, I was not ready to love this episode as much as I did. Even going back through all 10 episodes, this one is still my favorite. Just hands down, no questions asked. When an actress goes missing, it's up to Detective Renee Montoya to get to the bottom of the case. Here it is. Here's the wokeness. A lady detective made strictly for this show to really add in some diversity by force. What's that? Renee Montoya was made for the original Batman the Animated Series by Bruce Timm. Her character would even go on to become the Question in the comics? Oh, huh. When you put it that way, it seems like a real non-issue, just like making Commissioner Gordon and Barbara black. Oh no, there goes any anchor to reality in a series about a man fighting crime in a batsuit. No! So yeah, Detective Montoya, played by Michelle C. Bonilla, is going around the studio lot trying to get any information on who would want the actress to go missing. This is when we're introduced to Basil Karlo, played by Don Donahue. Basil Karlo would be based off the legendary late actor Boris Karloff, and if you know anything about comics, you know right from the get-go who the villain of this week is. Clayface! Was I bummed that Ron Perlman wasn't playing him? Absolutely. But honestly, Don does a great job with this iteration. Lacey Chabert would also play the missing actress Yvonne, and we get our first appearance of Lucius Fox, played by Bumper Robinson, two very seasoned voice actors that have been in all kinds of DC projects. Like, the whole episode is this noir murder mystery with Batman helping from the shadows and doing his own investigations. I'm a huge fan of GCPD, and since they're not making the GCPD show anymore, and instead chose to focus on Arkham Asylum, I think this is the closest we're ever gonna get to a GCPD-focused show, and I'm honestly fine with that. There's a perfect balance of Batman and detectives that lets the series still feel grounded, even if they're fighting a villain like Clayface. Like, again, the showrunner is Bruce Timm. He knows what he's doing, and there's this awareness of what you can and can't get away with in an animated series. And he uses the medium as a way to tell this noir story perfectly. I'll admit the last few bits with Yvonne did feel a bit stale when she was talking down to Basil and calling his acting unbelievable, but it's such a small part of an otherwise flawless episode. It really felt like a classic episode of Batman with just a vintage filter. And Be a Villain is a scene-stealing 9 out of 10. You know what? If you only watched this one episode of Caped Crusader, I can honestly see why you'd hate it. Bruce Wayne decks up journalists as they badmouth his dead parents with his mother's pearls on display in a museum. This is when we also meet Eel, the journalist played by Tom Kenny, which, like, wow. Not only is Tom Kenny in this as background voices, but so is Yuri Lowenthal and Grey Griffin. Three absolute powerhouses of voice acting that defined a lot of childhoods, giving their absolute alls on any roles that come their way. I don't know, you appreciate them being around more in weaker episodes like this. With valuable gems on display, it's only a matter of time before they're snatched by Gotham's premier cat burglar, Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, aka one of the easiest villains to come up with for a Batman. B to C and man to woman, and presto changeo, you have a Hal for your IBM. This go around, Selina Kyle would be played by legendary actress Christina Ricci, and her maid/guardian is Greta, played by Jackie Hoffman. When Selina's dad just up and leaves her, she starts to steal to fund her rich lifestyle. And because Bruce swung on a journalist that was mocking his dead mom, he gets assigned to obligatory therapy led by one Dr. Harleen Quinzel. She would be played by Jamie Chung, and I gotta admit, I love that this Harley Quinn has nothing to do with the Joker and is a psychologist just trying to make a difference, and we'll get more of her later, but it's great that she's sort of the foil getting some backstory out of Bruce Wayne without him just expositing that he got back from training in the mountains with that Ra's al Ghul fella. We get his tragic backstory, see why Alfred cares so much about him, and it's all surrounded by Selina Kyle just sort of running around and stealing all loosey-goosey until she gets handcuffed to the leg of a table. I don't know. I've never been huge on Catwoman, and this iteration just doesn't do anything. Christina Ricci is doing her absolute best, don't get me wrong, it's to the service of the most Adam West-esque episode of the season. It's just kind of fine. It's a necessary episode for the Bruce backstory and the first intro proper to Harley Quinn, but at the end of the day, everything around that just felt like filler. I had no desire to see Catwoman again after this, and it just didn't do anything for me as a whole, even looking at the rest of the episodes of the season. This is the only episode that I felt even an iota of boredom with. It's hard to make Catwoman a compelling character, and it just felt like they had to include her rather than having an idea of how to work her in. I kind of wish we got Selina Kyle introduced in one episode, and then after a lot of theft revealed that she's in fact Catwoman. It felt like a sped-run storyline. Kiss of the Catwoman is a furball hacking 6 out of 10. Oh boy, and then we get that real Batman good stuff. Kiss of the Catwoman very obviously suffers from being surrounded by greatness. The flaws in the episode are just that much more emphasized when you're coming hot off of a great noir detective story, and it's followed by easily one of the strongest episodes of the season. The mayor is trying to drum up support so he doesn't lose to Harvey Dent, and vows to catch Batman and clean up crime. We also get an appearance by Fleischer-era Lois Lane, which I gotta admit, I'd love to see this old school Batman team up with the old Superman for a classic adventure or two. I'm sure it's just a fun Easter egg like everything else, but I appreciate the implication of it. And that's the great thing with this show. There are just a ton of Easter eggs that I'm sure even I didn't get. So if I missed any, that's on me, but feel free to share some of your favorites in the comments. Like we see an inspector in the episode named Jim Corrigan, aka the First Spectre, or the guy that inadvertently creates a Spectre, depending on the comic you're reading. I don't know, there's too many references for this to be some cynical cash grab or something they wanted to do to build out the DCAU or show that they're progressive or anything. This was made because everyone working on it had a passion to make something truly special, and this episode is a perfect example of that. Flass and Bullock are determined to catch the Bat by any means possible, and so they break Firebug/Firefly out of jail and accidentally let him escape with his gear into the ward that Commissioner Gordon used to look after when he was on the beat. Like, I know the best Firefly iteration is probably the one we got in The Batman. Honestly, The Batman had some of the best villain designs, but I really like this retro Firebug look. He feels so twisted in a good way. I don't know. I loved his look. I loved everything about him. I loved the nightmare escape that he sees through his goggles, where it's just a bunch of fire dancing and he wants to, replicate that. So of course he goes into an apartment complex and starts lighting it up, and sure enough, Batman goes in to save everyone, as does Gordon. I really love that the villains of the episode are very much Bullock and Flass. Firebug is a troubled man who gets weaponized to lure out Batman. And sure enough, when he served his purpose, Flass and Bullock take him out and look like heroes, while Jim and Batman save the people trapped in the blaze, and the commish sees that Batman is just trying to help. The episode is a beautiful showcase of all the elements of the show. It's got absolutely beautiful sound design, great voice acting, and I mean the fire dancing in Firebug's eyes was so beautifully macabre. It's a genuinely enchanting episode that shows they had an idea going into this and they delivered on it spectacularly. Gary Anthony Williams really stands out as Flash though. Like Arnold Flash in the comics was just some corrupt cop that showed up in year one and didn't do a ton. Here they've actually given him some depth. He's clever about his schemes, and Gary Anthony Williams really makes him shine. Like, this is a career best performance for him, and I love hearing him take those more dramatic roles. The Night of the Hunters is an up in flames 10 out of 10. David Krumholtz guest stars, the guy from Numbers. I don't know. He's done some voice acting in the past, and I enjoy seeing him pop up. I like his voice. It's fun to hear him. Fun fact, David Kaye would also be in this episode, and on top of having a ton of voice credits to his name, he's also the announcer on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Did not know that before I went into this. The more you know. Anyway, rich men are going missing and showing up claiming they're ancient Egyptian pharaohs or kings, and it's up to Barbara and Batman to get to the bottom of it. We also see Barbara, Renee, and Harleen hanging out outside of work, and Harleen would even ask Renee out on a date. Aha! There it is. There's the wokeness. Harley Quinn has never dated a woman. What do you mean Harley Quinn available now on Max has 4 seasons and focuses around her and her girlfriend Poison Ivy? Say psych right now. Like, this is the perfect episode to talk about this. If anyone can reinvent Harley Quinn, it would be Bruce Timm, mostly on account of he created her alongside Paul Dini. Her first appearance was sure enough Batman the Animated Series, and she became one of the most iconic DC characters of all time. She has changed countless times, and even in the Joker 2 movie, Lady Gaga is even giving her own spin on the character. And she was gay-coded as far back as, again, Batman the Animated Series. You want to argue that changing the race matters? Cool. Why? Explain why it matters in vivid detail in the comments, because otherwise these characters are largely the same as their more familiar counterparts. Barbara can hold her own and was trained by her dad who had years on the force and is determined to get to the bottom of things and make Gotham less corrupt. The core of Barbara, Jim, and even Renee hasn't been changed, and they're stronger because they never try and shoehorn in other elements. Fast being black doesn't add or subtract from his character. It's just a creative decision that just makes him more memorable than he ever was in the comics. Like, they're changing and reimagining characters to make a more compelling story, and this episode is a perfect example of that. Harley Quinn, without the Joker's influence, is a psychologist who wants to make the most powerful men of Gotham respect their workers and admit their wrongdoings. What she wants isn't inherently wrong. It's how she's going about doing it that's the problem. Harleen and Renee go on a date, and when Batman and Barbara go to her lair, she attempts to take Batman out until Barbara tries to stop her, and Harley works to save them both, ultimately failing while Batman manages to save Barbara and earns Barbara's respect while Harleen falls to her death. Harleen isn't beyond saving, and she shows that at her core she means well and cares about her friends. However, the smartest thing they did was not take her out completely, and they keep the door open for her returning later with a letter she sends to Renee at the end. Which, like, yeah, there's no way Bruce Timm is only using Harley Quinn once in his story ideas. Batman is also not the main focus of the episode, which gives it a chance to be something creatively different. I don't know. Each episode, you can feel the enthusiasm in the creative team. You can tell each one has been so expertly crafted with Bruce Timm and his team knowing exactly what stories he's trying to tell, and the next episode is just a glorious example of this. The Stress of Her Regard is a King of Kings 9 out of 10. I'm sure this will take away what little credibility I have, and I'm sure the people frothing at the mouth will take this as a way to say that I'm not a true Batman fan, but I will stand by Batman the Brave and the Bold being one of the best Batman projects of all time. Diedrich Bader did a great job as Batman, and it just had a really great celebration of Silver Age comics. Leave it to Brave and the Bold to actually show off the Metal Men. So when an episode opens with Gentleman Ghost, you can bet I'm invested 110%. Gentleman Ghost attacks a bank truck and runs off with his winnings, and we find out that Lucius Fox had purchased land to build some low-income housing with the Wayne Enterprises brand. We see two very important things in this episode. Bruce is genuine friends with Lucius Fox and trusts him more than anyone, and he knows very little about Alfred, even just referring to him as Pennyworth and keeping that distance from him. And that's amazing. Again, this is very much a year one Batman without outright telling you this is year one Batman. Batman of Batman the Animated Series had been doing this for a while. You were just tossed right into the action. You don't really see him grow because it had to be episodic for Saturday morning cartoons and for kids to tune in at any episode and be like, yeah, Batman, go get the bad guys. Here, you can take that time to build him up. You can show incremental growth of Batman through the series. And you see that brilliantly in this episode. He's still figuring things out, and it's great to see a Batman with flaws. This is honestly the strongest just Batman episode of the entire season, and I really kind of love it. We're a little over halfway, and I'm finally used to Hamish's delivery, and I think his faithfulness to Kevin Conroy's style actually works in his favor now. You can tell he did his research and is genuinely trying his hardest, and that passion comes through. Like, the more he learns about Gentleman Ghost, the more he's convinced he's just some guy in a costume, but when the only thing that makes sense is that he's an actual ghost, he doesn't completely shrug that idea off. Batman is at his strongest when he embraces that anything is possible, when he's willing to dive into the occult to keep Gotham safe. And so he goes to consult with a master of the dark arts to learn how to stop this dapper phantom. This is where I expected to see Jason Blood, Etrigan, or John Constantine, but he actually meets with Linton Midnight, aka Papa Midnight. I don't know, I appreciate that we got Papa Midnight instead of the usual occult specialists. It'd be odd to have this Batman team up with, say, Zatanna to stop someone like Gentleman Ghost. Papa Midnight just sort of fits perfectly, especially when he's played, again, brilliantly by Cedric Yarborough. I don't know, in a really stacked cast, Cedric Yarborough really stands out. Batman and Alfred manage to burn the deed and attempt to exorcise the ghost, and Bruce actually learns something about Alfred, who keeps a deep, dark secret from Batman that we have no idea about, and Batman begins to respect him as an actual human being. The episode is a great showcase of Batman becoming the world's greatest detective, and that campiness that makes older Batman stories so endearing combined into one beautiful episode. Night Ride is a phantasmic 10 out of 10. When someone tries to pop a couple into a Gordon at the courthouse, Barbara is determined to keep her dad safe from the would-be assailant. She, Detective Montoya, Officer Corrigan, and Marcus Driver take Commissioner Gordon away since they know the cops can't be trusted. However, when the first assailant fails, the hit enlists a group of hunters led by Onomatopoeia, who speaks entirely in, you guessed it, onomatopoeias. Batman also goes to figure out what's going on, and we discover that there's a mole in the group keeping Jim safe. I appreciate that each episode isn't just super famous Batman villains popping up and doing something evil. Like, I know the first assailant is supposed to be Deadshot, but I'm really hoping it's not, because he did not do a good job. He's not a proper Deadshot. Give us more time with Deadshot. He's an icon. I'd kind of love if he was like a Richard Harrow character from Boardwalk Empire. That might be really cool for a Deadshot. But no, the villain of this episode is Onomatopoeia, who is a pretty unknown villain, all things considered. And like, how do you make a character like that work? You use him very sparingly, and you don't really show him off until he's fighting Batman. Turns out Corrigan was the traitor, and they weren't even after the commissioner, but actually Barbara. A former client of hers put out the hit because he hated that he ended up in jail. When Barbara finds out, she starts to question what she was doing with her life and if she was doing the right thing. It's great to see moral systems questioned for actually valid reasons. She fought for her client and he still hated her very existence. She didn't do anything that would inherently justify a hit. I think that's one of the benefits to the show feeling episodic, but having character growth from episode to episode. Like, throughout all of this, we've seen Harvey Dent's flawed campaign as he tries to show Gotham he's the one that should lead them. He's not a perfect person, but he does genuinely want to help, and that shows that they trust the audience with this show. This isn't the Batman you grew up with. This is a Batman for who you are now. A Batman made for adult viewers that can understand character growth and handle darker elements. Moving Target is a well-aimed 8 out of 10. Orphans Dickie and Jason sneak off to the carnival. Dickie and Jason, get it? Do you get it yet? Don't worry, there's a Carrie later too, slingshot and all. Carrie, of course, being the Robin from The Dark Knight Returns. This orphanage is swarmed with Robins. Anyway, these two boy wonders run into a girl who offers to show them something cool. If a Wednesday Addams looking girl tries to get you to go away from your friends and see something cool, fight every instinct and just say no. Anyway, it's a night at the carnival! Yay! Bruce goes on a date, Harvey tries to drum up popularity by paying for orphans to go to the carnival, but when they go missing, Harvey brushes them aside and it's actually Bruce that offers to help and go look for them. This is kind of where I would have liked to see him going on a date with Selena Kyle and not knowing she's Batwoman, and it kind of adds that extra layer to it. Like have her reveal that she's Catwoman at the end of the first season or something. It felt like a perfect spot for her to be there. We also see the girl from earlier as part of a sideshow act where she effortlessly lifts a dumbbell that even strong men can't lift. Gets more and more sus by the minute. Yeah, turns out the girl is named Nocturne and she's basically a vampire who sucks life force to maintain her strength, but she's been steadily losing control of her powers while her brother tries to keep her hunger in check so no one has to suffer. He's willing to tour the country just so she can keep a low profile and feed so she can have a somewhat normal life. Now, I gotta admit, the instant I saw a carnival and a freak show, there was only one thing I wanted to see. Nocturne is fine, but I want my scaly boy, good old Killer Croc. And even though he's not the villain of the episode, sure enough, good old Waylon is there. And he's not even presented as some sort of red herring. He beats Bruce up, but it's literally because he broke into their home and he's looking for a bunch of kids, which is super suspicious. He's totally justified in trying to keep him away from everyone. However, when Batman does manage to save the kids and encounters Nocturne, who is at her limit as the sun starts to rise, with her brother gone because she threw him against a bookshelf, she has nothing else to live for and lets the sunlight hit her vampiric form, causing her to burn up. The episode felt very familiar. It felt a lot like that scene from Justice League Unlimited's epilogue episode, where Batman is sitting with Ace in her last moments as her powers go haywire. It's very much a tragic monster story, not only in the literal sense with Nocturne, but also we see Harvey Dent making deals with Rupert Thorne to get the help he needs to be mayor. Deals with the devil are usually paid in blood. Where and Be a Villain is a perfect episodic for Caped Crusader, and Night Ride feels like a Dark Brave and the Bold episode, Nocturne feels like a Batman the Animated Series episode that had to be scrapped, and they got to do it properly with this series. And seeing some of the interviews, it looks like I'm not too far off in saying that. It's just an absolutely fantastic episode that showcases all the elements that made Batman an absolute classic series. One of the strongest things they highlighted in Batman the Animated Series was Batman's empathy. He believed that a lot of the villains could be rehabilitated. And because of his hard work, he did try and uplift the citizens of Gotham. People always focus on, oh, he fought the Joker, but it's like, yeah. And he also understood the tragedy of being cursed with these afflictions. In a lot of ways, it also reminded me of Growing Pains, the episode where Clayface made a daughter. Though I will say the Robins in the episode were a bit distracting, but never took away from the episode as a whole. It honestly felt like too many Easter eggs just all thrown in there. Nocturne is a solar-powered 10 out of 10. Throughout the season, we've seen Harvey Dent frequently pop up, and sure enough, he's never been a real good guy, but he was never outright a villain either. He followed his own principles, his own form of justice, so it only makes sense that when he's told to throw out charges by Rupert Thorne, he starts to double-cross him and ends up with a half-face full of acid for his troubles. Any Batman story suffers from the audience coming in with an almost encyclopedic knowledge of the most famous members of his rogues gallery. Anytime you see Harvey Dent, you know more or less he's ending up Two-Face. If someone's named Edward, he's probably the Riddler. Now, you can subvert those expectations and make someone like the Penguin a woman, or you can lean into it and keep dangling that big event like a carrot at the end of a stick. You know he's gonna lose half his face, you just don't know when. And sure enough, during a dinner with Bruce Wayne, he has a meltdown and runs off thinking everyone is talking about him. I know I always talk about voice actor this and voice actor that, and you need to appreciate the craft, but this is honestly a career best performance for Diedrich Bader, an actor known almost exclusively for his comedy work that absolutely knocks it out of the park as Harvey. He never tries to make him more lighthearted, and you can really hear the internal conflict in his voice. He's conflicted even as he starts his revenge tour against Thorne. He knows what he's doing is wrong, but he's compelled to do it. If he didn't have that conflict, he just wouldn't be Two-Face. And this is very much Two-Face in the vein of the Executioner from the original animated series. Sure enough, when he fears he's going to lose the internal struggle, Batman is able to stop him and get him the help he needs at Arkham. This two-parter season finale just feels a cut above the rest of the season, and it's easy to see why. This is the natural conclusion of a season dedicated to building up all the different players in this Gotham. We see growth, storylines conclude, and Gotham get more and more fleshed out as we walk away from this penultimate adventure. And honestly, again, a lot of that is because Diedrich Bader did such a great job as Harvey Dent. I have to wonder, would he have been as good as Batman in this? And I think probably not. That's not his performance as Batman. His Batman is much more like Hoss Delgado from Billy and Mandy. It's a much more light-hearted Batman. So I appreciate that they still brought him on and gave him somewhere to actually cut his teeth. And this portrayal is just brilliant. I don't know. I know I go way in depth on voice actors. It's so impressive to me what they come up with. Anyway, the killer inside me is an acid-washed 10 out of 10. And here we are, the season finale. Barbara and Bruce are determined to get Dent the help he needs, and they think if he can leverage the hot goss he has on the corruption of Gotham's finest, they might be able to get him a deal. Naturally, this does not make the corrupt cops happy, and so they're all out to hunt Harvey and make sure he doesn't squeal one way or another. And that's really the whole episode. Harvey and Barbara being hunted and the rest of the crew trying to keep them safe. There's a tension to this episode that wouldn't be there if they didn't build to it throughout the season. You know Flass and Bullock's characters because you've seen them be this corrupt through the entire season. This is what an adult Batman series looks like, and it's just great to see everything coming together. Sure enough, when they're at the pier and trying to get Harvey on a boat, they're cornered, and when Flass shoots at Barbara, Harvey gets in the way and gets taken out instead. While the corrupt cops may have won, Harvey went out a hero. He didn't let the darkness win. The episode does not end on a super positive note. And if we look at Batman, he really didn't fix all the problems. He was not a knight in shining bat armor. He's still learning how to be a hero. This is how you do a year one story. This is how you introduce all these players and give them a smaller adventure to get their personalities front and center. I will say, ironically, the weakest part of the episode to me was the final scene where we see a Shaq and a laughing man that takes his last breath as a white-faced villain cracks a smile. I don't know. Oddly enough, I don't think there's a place for the Joker in Caped Crusader, especially in a series made by Bruce Timm, because as iconic as Kevin Conroy was as Batman, Mark Hamill is equally prolific as the Joker, and not having either of them in the show it hits the ear wrong. I don't know. Overall, the episode is fun. It's just a culmination of everything we've been building towards. This is your final big display of Gordon and Barbara without Barbara being hinted at as being Batgirl or anything. And I also appreciated that. We don't get any leading on that Batgirl's coming soon or a Robin. It's still very much Batman has a lot to learn. This is him partnering with the GCPD. I don't know. I think this was absolutely brilliant. The episode does not end with sunshine and rainbows. It ends in tragedy. And that highlights that gothic feeling of Caped Crusader perfectly. And I know you have to have the Joker. He's the Joker. He's Batman's greatest villain. I wish we had more time without him. That's like having Bane just come in as a strong man who's ready to break the bat, and he just started being the Batman. I don't know. It felt tacked on, but I trust Bruce Timm to take it where he wants to take it. Savage Night is a fantastically foggy 9 out of 10. And there we have it. That's season 1. Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Honestly, looking at the ratings again, I'd say the reality of the show is somewhere in the middle. A very hearty and solid 8 or 9 out of 10 overall that showcases why Bruce Timm's Batman became such a cultural icon. If you think this show is woke because of a woman penguin or reimagining of characters, then you honestly never paid attention to the original series. This isn't new, and if you're trying to push that angle, you're honestly just grifting. If you have a problem with Commissioner Gordon and Barbara being reimagined as being black, even though every other element of their characters is still present, then I want you to say with your whole chest why you have a problem with it. Because it's not because who they are changed at all. Kevin Conroy got to spend the last of his days finally openly and proudly gay after having to hide his sexuality for years in fear of being blacklisted or not getting roles. Superheroes have been and will always be a reflection of societal issues, and this series was crafted with genuine love for the characters, the stories, and the actors that did and do bring them to life. This wasn't some IP refresh just to make money off of nostalgia. This was Bruce Timm having a genuine idea on what he wanted to do to continue the Batman legacy, brought on the most talented people they could find, and created something truly spectacular. I don't know. I was genuinely baffled that there was any amount of outcry from this series, and after watching it, I'm still confused that anyone could call a series like this pandering or woke. It's disingenuous, and I have to hope the critics that were bashing it know their arguments were empty right from the get-go. I don't know, it felt like it was just something to be thrown under the bus, even though it did not earn it at all. It's frustrating, okay? It's frustrating. You have this beautiful Batman noir story, and people just can't get over episode 1. Oh, there's a lady penguin, I hate this show. And like, okay, and did you watch the rest of it? Did you see that it's also just all brilliant, all good? And the female penguin is played by Minnie Driver of all people? Like, I don't know. There were so many reviews that were mentioning DEI and everything. It was embarrassing. Because if you do any research on the show, these are all people that have been a part of the DC projects for decades. It's just, if this had come out 5 years ago, I don't think it would have gotten anywhere near the flack it does. But I'm rambling. So that's going to do it for us here at the lecture hall. So sorry this didn't come out sooner. The old academic has been going through it, but we push on, and I should have more videos out this week. Thank you all so much for watching, and huge shout out to our patrons and members. And if you want to join their ranks, just $2 a month gets you early access to videos and your name on this neat list. Ooh! Stay strong, keep fighting, and no matter what, never forget that you matter and that I'm proud of you. Life can only defeat you if you let it. A rising tide lifts all ships, and I can feel one hell of a surge coming on. Thank you all for being you, and I'll hopefully see you all next time when we get to review Season 2. Goodbye, everybody. Ooh, if there's not a Season 2, I'm gonna be so mad.